I used to believe that silence was something you earned with age. That one day, life would grow quieter out of respect for everything you'd already carried. I was wrong. Silence doesn't arrive gently. It doesn't knock. It walks straight in after betrayal and sits down like it owns the place. The silence moved into my house the same week my son decided I was no longer his responsibility, just an inconvenience that had overstayed its welcome. The kind of silence that hums in the walls, that settles into the corners of rooms, that makes familiar furniture feel like strangers. I remember standing in my kitchen that morning, holding a mug that had gone cold, listening to the clock tick too loudly, wondering how a house that once held birthday songs and scraped knees and Sunday laughter had become a courtroom where I was waiting for judgment. I was 76 years old, a grandmother, a woman with silver hair and slow knees and a lifetime of memories stitched into her bones. And apparently, that made me disposable. My son had always been charming, the kind of man who smiled easily, spoke softly, and never raised his voice, which made it harder to notice when he was hurting someone. He had learned, somewhere along the way, that cruelty didn't need volume, it just needed timing. It started quietly, everything like this does. He suggested I rest more. He insisted on handling things. He said, "Let me take care of it, Mom," the way a man says, "I know better than you now." At first, I was grateful. I had raised him to be responsible, to be helpful. I didn't realize I had also raised him to believe my life was something he could reorganize. My daughter-in-law was efficient. That was the word people used for women like her. Efficient, polished, always dressed as if she might be photographed unexpectedly. She smiled with her mouth, not her eyes, and spoke in sentences that sounded kind but landed sharp. She began by rearranging my cabinets. "You shouldn't have to reach so high," she said, moving things without asking. Then she rearranged my routines. "You shouldn't be driving anymore," she said, casually taking my keys. Then she rearranged my authority. "We've decided," she said one afternoon, standing in my living room as if she were inspecting a property she planned to sell, "that it's time for a different arrangement." Different arrangement. People use soft words when they don't want to admit they're about to be cruel. I remember the day they told me I would be temporarily relocated. That was the phrase, temporarily relocated, like I was a couch being moved during renovations, like my life could be boxed up and stored until they felt finished with it. They didn't ask what I wanted, they told me what would happen. And my son, my boy, the one whose fevers I cooled with damp cloths, whose nightmares I chased away with stories, stood there and nodded as if this were reasonable, as if I were not the woman who had taught him how to tie his shoes and forgive himself. The nursing home smelled like antiseptic and resignation, a clean smell, to clean, like life had been wiped down until nothing personal remained. The walls were pale, the lighting too bright, the smiles professional. They called it assisted living. What it assisted most was forgetting who you were. At night, I lay in a narrow bed listening to other people's televisions through thin walls, game shows, news reports, laughter that wasn't meant for me. I pressed my hand against my chest sometimes just to feel my heart still beating, because everything else felt borrowed. I watched my son visit once a week, always on Sundays, always for exactly 30 minutes. He would sit on the edge of the chair, check his watch without realizing it, ask if I was settling in. As if exile was a phase, as if displacement was comfort. And then, one afternoon, without warning, a woman from the office asked me to sign a stack of papers. She spoke quickly, cheerfully, as if we were discussing menu choices instead of my life. "These are just formalities," she said. "Your son is helping manage your assets." Manage, that word should have scared me more than it did, but fear dulls when it lasts too long. It becomes background noise. It was only later, much later, that I realized what had happened. My home, the house I had lived in for 43 years, the house where my husband died in his sleep, the house where my grandchildren took their first steps, it was no longer mine, or at least, that's what they thought. Because there are things people forget. When they underestimate old women, we remember everything. I remembered the year my husband and I nearly lost that house, the night we sat at the kitchen table, bills spread out like a losing hand of cards, while rain hammered the windows. I remembered the decision I made then, the quiet, practical one, the paperwork signed, the protection put in place. I remembered because I had planned for storms long before this one arrived. They never asked me if I remembered. That was their mistake. The day I returned to the house, escorted, supervised, treated like a guest in my own life, I felt something wake up inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Sharper. A clarity that cut through the fog I'd been living in. I walked slowly through each room, let my fingers brush the walls, counted my steps like a ritual. I could feel it. The truth, buried beneath their assumptions. That night, after everyone else slept, I opened the small metal box I had kept hidden for decades, the one my husband used to call my insurance against foolish men. Inside were documents yellowed with time, edges soft, but power intact. My name. Only my name. I sat at the table until dawn, reading and rereading, letting the weight of it settle into my bones. Not triumph. Something steadier. Something earned. The next morning, I called a lawyer. She listened without interrupting. That alone felt revolutionary. When I slid the papers across her desk, her expression changed just slightly. The way professionals react when they realize the story is about to turn. "You're not powerless," she said gently. I smiled then, not because I was happy, because I was awake. What followed was not dramatic. No shouting, no slammed doors, just paper, law, time, consequences. My son didn't yell when he found out. He went quiet, the way children do when they realize the rules apply to them too. My daughter-in-law cried, loudly, publicly. For effect, neither of them apologized. They didn't have to. Watching them pack was not satisfying. The way people imagine revenge to be, there was no thrill, no victory music, just a strange calm, like watching a storm move out to sea. When the door finally closed behind them, the house exhaled. I swear it did. The walls felt warmer. The air settled. That night, I slept in my own bed again. The mattress remembered me. My body did too. In the weeks that followed, I moved slowly, put things back where they belonged, hung photos they had taken down, let dust settle where I liked it. I visited the nursing home once more, not to stay, but to say goodbye, to the women who sat staring out windows, to the ones whose families meant well but did harm. I held hands. I listened. I understood them now in a way I hadn't before. Aging doesn't make you invisible. It reveals who was already willing to look away. My son still calls sometimes, his voice careful, measured, as if he's afraid of saying the wrong thing. I don't rush him. Time teaches lessons better than anger ever could. I sit on my porch in the evenings now, watch the light change, feel the quiet for what it really is, not abandonment, not punishment, but space, to belong to myself again. If you are listening to this, and you feel that tightening in your chest, that recognition, let me tell you something I wish I'd known sooner. Love does not require your disappearance. Family is not allowed to erase you. And silence, when chosen, instead of imposed, can be a kind of peace. I am old enough now to know the difference, and strong enough to keep it. There are mornings now when I wake before the sun, not because of pain or worry, but because my body remembers purpose. The kettle sings softly in the kitchen. The floor is cool beneath my feet. These small sensations feel like gifts I forgot I was allowed to open. People think justice is loud. They imagine speeches, confrontations, raised voices, but the truest justice I've known arrived quietly. It came in the form of ordinary days, reclaimed. I water my plants slowly, letting the soil drink before I move on. I don't rush anymore. Rushing was something I did when everyone else's needs came first. Now, time stretches itself around me, patient and forgiving. Sometimes, neighbors stop to talk. They say things like, "You seem lighter," or "You're glowing these days." I nod and smile, because how do you explain that the weight they see gone was never physical? It was the burden of being treated like an ending instead of a whole story. I still think about my son, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I see now the moment he stopped seeing me as a mother and started seeing me as a resource. It didn't happen all at once. It rarely does. It crept in through entitlement, through convenience, through the lie that love gives permission to take. That lie is everywhere. I hear it in the voices of other women my age, at the pharmacy, at the bus stop, in whispers over tea, stories of houses signed away, decisions made for their own good. Live slowly edited until only the margins remain. We are taught to be grateful for scraps of respect. I am no longer grateful for scraps. One afternoon, my granddaughter came to visit alone. She stood in the doorway uncertainly, taller now, older than the last memory I had of her. She looked around the house as if seeing it for the first time. "Grandma," she said quietly, "I didn't know." I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't need to. Children grow up and learn that adults are not always right, just louder. I hugged her. Not tightly, not desperately, just enough to say, I am still here. After she left, I sat for a long time in the living room, the late light pooling on the carpet. I thought about how close I had come to disappearing into someone else's plan, how easily my life could have been reduced to visiting hours and permission slips. That thought still chills me, but it also sharpens me, because survival teaches you something important. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because they share your blood. Peace is not selfish, boundaries are not cruelty, and aging is not surrender. If anything, it is refinement. I move through the world now with fewer apologies. When someone speaks over me, I wait. Silence makes people uncomfortable. Let them feel it. I've carried enough discomfort for one lifetime at night. Before I sleep, I place my hand over my heart again, not to check if it's still beating, but to thank it for enduring, for warning me, for holding steady when everything else tried to shift beneath me. I don't know how many years I have left. None of us do. But I know this, they will be mine, and that is more than enough. There are moments now when the past tries to speak louder than the present. It usually happens in the quiet when the house settles, when the night stretches long, when memories think they deserve attention simply because they're old. I let them speak, then I let them pass. I've learned that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing what gets to stay. Some memories sit with me like old friends. Others knock only to remind me why the door stays closed. People still ask, carefully, as if walking on thin ice, whether I regret how things ended with my son. They expect a soft answer, a forgiving one, something that makes them comfortable. I tell them the truth. I regret how long I doubted myself. That usually ends the conversation. Because here's what no one tells you. Betrayal hurts more when it wears the face of family, when it arrives carrying familiar names and shared holidays, when it uses your love as leverage. But clarity is clean pain. It doesn't linger. It doesn't poison, it frees. I've stopped explaining my choices. Explanations invite negotiations, and my life is no longer up for bargaining. I've already given my years to service, to sacrifice, to putting others first. I don't owe the remainder as an apology. Sometimes, I sit at my old desk and write letters I never send. Not to accuse, not to demand, just to release. Ink is honest in ways voices sometimes aren't. The words come slower now, but they come truer. I write about the woman I was before fear crept in, about the strength I mistook for obligation, about the day I realized love should not cost you your place in the world, and when the page fills, I fold it neatly, place it in a drawer, close it. Not everything needs to be confronted to be finished. In the mirror, I see my mother's face more clearly now, the lines, the set of the mouth, the eyes that have learned when to soften and when to hold firm. I used to wonder if aging meant losing myself. I know better now. Aging gave me myself back. If my story sounds familiar, if you hear your own fears echoing between these words, let me say this gently. Pay attention to the first time someone makes you feel small in your own life. That moment matters, and remember, you are not difficult for wanting dignity. You are not stubborn for protecting your ground. You are not wrong for choosing yourself when no one else will. I didn't become strong in spite of my age. I became strong because of it. There was a time when I thought peace meant silence. No arguments, no raised voices, no doors slammed hard enough to shake the walls. I was wrong. Silence can be a cage, if it's built from fear. Real peace sounds different. It sounds like honesty spoken without trembling, like boundaries held without apology, like a quiet house that feels full instead of empty. These days, I wake up slowly. I let the morning come to me instead of rushing toward it. The kettle whistles. Light spills across the floor. Small things, ordinary things, the kind I once ignored while trying to keep everyone else comfortable. Now they feel like proof that I'm still here. Sometimes neighbors stop by. They bring gossip, casseroles, questions they pretend are casual. Have you heard from your son? Are things better now? I smile kindly. I don't lie. I don't explain. Things are clear now, I say, and clarity, I've learned, scares people more than conflict, because clarity doesn't bend. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't need permission. At night, when I sit alone, I no longer replay conversations, wishing I'd said something different. I said what mattered when it mattered. The rest is just noise trying to survive after losing its power. I used to believe love meant endurance. That if I could just hold on long enough, soften enough, forgive enough, things would change. But love isn't measured by how much pain you tolerate. Love is measured by how much truth you're allowed to carry without being punished for it. And for the first time in years, my truth sits comfortably beside me. It doesn't flinch. It doesn't hide, it breathes. If this house could speak, it wouldn't tell stories of conflict or loss. It would tell stories of reclamation, of a woman who stopped shrinking to fit into spaces that no longer deserved her. I didn't lose my family. I found myself, and that, at this stage of life, feels like a miracle I earned. I used to think aging was about letting go of strength, of relevance, of being needed. That's what they teach you quietly, without ever saying it out loud. They praise your wisdom but strip you of your authority. They call you sweet when they really mean small. They pat your hand when they want you to stay quiet. For a long time, I played that role well. I smiled when my opinions were brushed aside. I nodded when decisions were made without me. I swallowed words that burned my throat because I didn't want to be called difficult, ungrateful, or confused. Especially confused. That word hangs over women like me like a threat. One raised eyebrow, one forgotten name, one slow step, and suddenly your entire life is questioned. Not out of care, but convenience. I saw it happen slowly. Conversations would pause when I entered the room. My belongings would be reorganized to help. Papers would go missing and reappear in different drawers. I was told I had moved them myself. When I insisted I hadn't, they smiled the way you smile at a child who believes in monsters under the bed. That's not how you remember it. They'd say, memory is a fragile thing. When enough people tell you it's broken, you start checking your own reflection for cracks. I began writing things down. Dates, words, looks exchanged across rooms. Not because I didn't trust myself, but because I needed proof that I still existed. Exactly as I felt. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being doubted while you're still fully awake. People think loneliness arrives when the house goes quiet, but it actually arrives when the house is full and no one is listening. I would sit at the table, hands wrapped around a warm mug, while plans were made around me. Plans about my future, my comfort, my safety. All the right words, none of the right respect. They spoke of me like I was already gone. And something in me, something old and stubborn and alive, refused to disappear quietly. I remembered who I had been before anyone questioned my capacity. A woman who ran a household on grit and instinct. A woman who stretched money, raised children, worked jobs that didn't come with praise or applause. I survived decades that never offered softness. And now, suddenly, I was too fragile to choose my own chair. No, that was the moment I stopped apologizing for taking up space. I spoke slower, not softer. I asked for things in writing. I corrected lies immediately, calmly, without anger. Anger would have given them an excuse. Clarity left them nowhere to hide. Some people don't get louder when they lose control. They get colder. They withdrew affection. They limited visits. They called less often. Silence, used as punishment. But I had already made peace with quiet. What they didn't understand was this. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was afraid of disappearing while surrounded. So, I chose solitude with dignity over company that erased me. And something unexpected happened. The air in my home changed. Rooms felt lighter. Time moved slower, kinder. I started doing things just because I wanted to, not because they were practical, or approved, or efficient. I baked bread, even though it took all afternoon. I sat by the window doing nothing at all. I laughed out loud at the television without worrying who might hear. Freedom, I learned, doesn't arrive with noise, it arrives with permission. The kind you finally give yourself. I don't know how many years I have left, none of us do. But I know this, whatever time remains will be lived in my own voice, at my own pace, with my spine straight and my eyes open. They can keep their assumptions. I'm still here, still thinking, still choosing, and that, to me, is what survival looks like when you refuse to fade.